guys, welcome to episode 2 of The Weight of Her Name. I'm your host, Deanna, and welcome back to episode 2. If you got to join us for episode 1 and you watched episode 1, thank you so much. I appreciate all the love and support that I've been getting for the podcast. And if you watched, you dropped comments, you liked, you subscribed, whatever the cost may be, I am highly appreciative, and I'm very glad that you guys have been joining me in this journey on this podcast, because this is just something I wanted to do, to be able to get my story out there, others' stories out there, and to just build this community and leave something behind one day when I'm gone, that other people will know that they are not alone, that this is something that's happened to other people, and you're not grieving alone at the end of the day. So I really appreciate everybody that's like, comment, subscribed, like, and shared, and so on and so forth. Just watching. Nothing that you do here costs any kind of money. Signing up is free. Watching is free. You don't even need a account to watch. So everything that you do here, commenting free, sharing free, because this is absolutely not about the money. This is not about the followers. This is not about any of that. So if you are definitely supporting this cause and everything like that, please continue sharing, continue coming back to the channel to watch these episodes. That definitely means a lot to me. And letting my baby's name and other babies, letting their names live on. So let's get a deep dive into episode 2. Here we go. As you know, of course, got Atticus with us, and her candle is lit. So if you are at home and you're watching with me, and you're just taking some time out of your day to watch and be here with me in the podcast, I encourage you, if you have a lost one, whether it be your child, your grandchild, your niece, your nephew, whatever the case may be, go ahead, light a candle. That's just, a little small representation of, our little angels. They're here with us. They're watching. Atticus is here with me every day. And I couldn't be more happy to know that, I got to love her. I got to hold her. And now I get to hold her in my heart. And she gets to watch over me every day until we get to meet again. All right. I have, as you can see, something new on our mantle today, which is going to be our butterfly. This is the butterfly that I encapsulated for Atticus' butterfly release for her heavenly birthday on October 1st. That's just a little memento. I try to keep small little mementos that remind me of her, or stuff that just makes me feel good about her. So, which is usually everything. I mean, I am a hoarder for Atticus, but it's always usually something very small that I can either hold or, put together with her little memorial. That way, either A, they don't get lost, and 2, it's always something to talk about. So when people ask about her, there's always something I can show. So that is what that is, and it should hopefully be joining us in every episode, because her heavenly birthday just passed on October 1st. So happy heavenly birthday to my baby. I love you, and until we meet again, of course. But anyways, let's get into episode 2 and what it's going to be all about. So today we are going to be talking about my story, the whole story, the bigger picture, the more in-depth and in detail story. So over the course of at least 10 years, I wanted to have children. I wanted to carry a child and everything like that. The people that I was with before, thankfully, I was not able to have children with them, and I am able to now have children with my wife, who I am with currently, and who I've started my family with, and I'm very grateful for that. So even though it took many years, it took lots of tears, it took lots of sleepless nights, lots of stress, eventually I did get here, and this is now the story that I want to tell, right? So just to start, like I said, years ago, I always wanted kids. I tried to do, appointments and things like that to figure out where my fertility and everything was. So when I first started out, of course, this was not IVF and things like that. They were around, but I did not have a whole lot of knowledge with it. I was very ignorant to the whole baby making situation, which I think a lot of people, more people than not, can be very ignorant to the situation of how the reproductive system works and how we are able to even take, this DNA and put it together and it creates this human, right? So, I'm not afraid to say it. I was very ignorant to that. And over the years, I learned a lot about the whole baby making situation and IVF, IUI, artificial insemination, so on and so forth. So if you're going through IVF, if you're going through IUI, if you're going through fertility treatments, I definitely understand. If you are just here and this is something you were just curious about, and you're just like, I don't know what I want to do, I don't know where to go from here, I don't know what to expect, so on and so forth, that yes, there are fertility treatments out there, and the first thing to get you started is setting up an appointment with a fertility doctor. Yes, we all of us women go to a OBGYN. Okay, that is where I started. Should I have started there? It's okay if you start there, but your best solution is to start with a fertility specialist. These are people who specializes in fertility. Your OBGYN, even though they specialize in the woman's body, they only really focus on your innards, your reproductive system, and things like that. But a fertility specialist is going to go far more in depth than what an OBGYN is going to do. Okay? So if, that's just been on your mind, then wholeheartedly go to a fertility specialist, start there, and that is where your journey will eventually begin, and hopefully, you have something beautiful that comes out at the end, right? So of course, like I said, I went to my OBGYN years ago. She told me, of course I had a perfectly fine uterus, things like that, and I should be okay to try to have children. And that was that. Over the years, I did try. However, I did not fall pregnant. So, of course, there were lots and lots of tears. I mean, I felt like I was being kicked left and right. And then eventually, about 6 years ago, me and my now wife got together. We tried, and it failed. And of course, it was very detrimental. Emotional, it took a toll. It took its toll. And eventually my wife fell pregnant with our now son, and which is great, because that was I always wanted children. I wanted children with her, to be quite honest. Like I wanted her to have children, and she also had a hard time getting pregnant. So we ended up with our little miracle baby from her, and she carried 2 pretty much close to term. He was born a little early, about by 4 weeks, but she pretty much carried to term. He was born pretty healthy. Of course, he did have high bilirubin, so he had to be on a light, but for the most part, he was healthy. He came home after a few days, and I got to love on him from day one, and that was great. So whatever, he was born within the first year of us being together. We got married within the first year of us officially being together. Before that, we just dated, but now we were officially together, and we had him. We got married. We moved, and once we moved, we decided to continue trying to get pregnant through my body, and it just wasn't working. So eventually, as you know, I did all of this research on what to do, where to go. The start of this actual story for Atticus kind of really starts here. We went through CNY fertility specialist. Nothing wrong with them. That's just where we started, and they kind of thought I might have PCOS, but then they kind of say you don't really have signs and symptoms of PCOS other than you have polycystic ovaries. That is all that they got from there. So they said, hey, let's try an IUI and we can go from there. So we tried 2 IUIs through CNY. That did not take. And it could have been for very different reasons. Yes, because I have polycystic ovarian syndrome, but also the donors that I was also using at the time could have also been the problem. We don't know. But anyhow, we decided that after the second failed IUI that we were just going to go into IVF and see what that option was about. During this time, I met a couple of great friends of mine that, kind of caught me up on some stuff, and they gave me some information that I then used to go to my next fertility specialist, which is Florida Fertility Specialist. So, woo woo, Dr. Fantasia and Dr. Sanchez, both great and awesome fertility specialists. So if you are in the Florida area and you just need a recommendation, I definitely recommend the Florida Fertility Specialist, Dr. Fantasia and Dr. Sanchez, out in Clearwater and in Tampa. So, and they're not paying me to say that, okay? This is me plugging them because they absolutely changed my life. Because at this point now, once I gotten to meet them and sit down with them, my entire life felt like it changed, of course, right? So in about February of 2023, 2023. No, 2024, because what year is this? 2025? So 2024. Anyhow, in the beginning of that year, I started I started my appointment. So I went to them. They confirmed that I had polycystic ovarian syndrome with male factor, which means my eggs, they are not maturing enough to be fertilized. So I'm maturing, and this is from a person who has regular cycle, no missed days, no missed months. I mean, out of my entire life, I'm like, hey, I've only missed maybe 3 of my cycles. I was able to count that on my hand. I didn't have super horrible cramps or anything. And first of all, there was times where I had absolutely no cramps. And if I did have cramps, it literally took like a 400 milligram ibuprofen, acetaminophen, whatever, and the pain was gone within, minutes. So I would have never thought nothing of it. I didn't have, the extreme body hair that most women have with polycystic ovarian syndrome. I didn't have the chin hair. I didn't have the chest hair or anything like that. Now the one thing I did have was the super hairy legs, but you never know. That's just, nobody thinks, hey, because I have hairy legs, I got PCOS, and that don't necessarily mean that. But that is the only body hair on me that was always just thicker, and that was about it. So I didn't have anything that indicated PCOS right off the bat. So when they told me that, I of course cried. But I cried not only because I was happy. I cried because I was sad. I cried because I was angry. I cried because I had 1,000,001 different emotions running through my body. I was happy to know that I finally had an answer to the reason why I wasn't getting pregnant. I had an epiphany that was like, how come we didn't just know this sooner, and so on and so forth. So not to say I was just very much confused. I was very much happy. I was all over the place. So once I found that out, they told me I was a candidate for IVF, and that IVF was more than likely the best route I would take in order to get pregnant. Not saying that you cannot do IUIs, not saying that you can't do artificial insemination at home. Doesn't mean that you can't, try doing what you do to make, the birds and the bees just to have a baby. That's not to say that it's not impossible. It's just a lot more complicated, right? So after all this years spent, all this money spent, we decided, hey, we're going to just do the IVF route, because at the end of the day, this is what's most important, and we will figure it out. Understandable, this is not a good solution for everybody, because IVF is especially expensive. I'm not going to lie to you there. Through lots of prayers and hopes and saving and everything was the only reason we were able to get to go through the IVF process. I mean, for us, I want to say IVF is going to cost you to anywhere about $30,000 and more, right? Because like the first half of IVF was 20 grand by itself, and that's just a starting number, right? So as we're going through all of this stuff, it was so stressful, because it was like, where's the money gonna come from? Where is this gonna come from? How are we gonna make these IVF dates work? And so on and so forth. Now, with God and Jesus taking the wheel, I kid you not, it was a miracle. We were able to afford it. We were able to pay for it right off the bat. Medications. I was on several injections. I was on several pills for like estrogen and things to help fluff up my uterus, things to help the blood flow to the uterus, things to produce eggs, or to produce follicles, which then in turn produced eggs. So eventually, after being on birth control, that's where because they were controlling my cycles at this point, and being on several different medications, injections that, like I said, to help grow my follicles, to then grow my eggs. And then I also had to go through a retrieval process, and the retrieval process for me took some time. I was heavily sick. I was in pain. I couldn't really move. It took me about the third day where I started to actually feel normal again, and so on and so forth with that. But I got through, and at the end, I think altogether, if I'm not mistaken, we gathered about 28 eggs out of my body alone. Statistically, they say that you'll end up with less than half of those for, embryos, blasts, or whatever you like to call it. And by the end, we ended up with 14 embryos in total. This means that 14 of these eggs actually made it to a point where they were healthy and able to be implanted. So I think it was actually about 16 because we had to send them off to be PGTA tested, and 2 came back abnormal, and the rest, all of the other 14, came back normal, or healthy per se. And I won't go into specifics. Yes, I do know the gender of all of them. We did know the gender of Atticus when we implanted, which was a girl. We decided that we were going to implant a girl embryo, and so we did the best one. And she already had her name, Atticus, which we got from a poet that we absolutely love. And then of course Rain, just because we wanted to give her a very powerful name, Atticus Rain Jackson Carter. At the end of the day, it is her name, and it was so fitting for her because she was such a spitfire. Okay. So anyhow, we went through our insemination, and I got me some Cane's French fries that day, and we went to the beach, and we did a little ritual, and within a couple days I took a pregnancy test, and that bad boy came out positive. It was the first time in my life I had ever seen a positive pregnancy test. I of course was so very happy when I got that pregnancy test and saw it, and then I waited for my wife to get home to tell her that we're pregnant, and she of course was super excited. There is videos of it out there, so I'm not gonna go into detail and put a whole bunch of pictures and stuff in it. So if you want to see, it's on TikTok and everything like that, when as we found out, and things like that. So we found out we were pregnant. And as we were going through the pregnancy, I was actually pretty fine. It was crazy. So I'm like, I'm pregnant? What? I ain't got no symptoms. What you mean? I think I had more symptoms when I was symptom spotting than I have now. And then at 6 weeks is when it started. At 6 weeks, the puking set on. So I was vomiting all the time. Come to find out, I had HG, which is hyperemesis, which is basically cyclic vomiting. From pregnancy, just cyclic vomiting, and I had that, and it was to the point I was getting sick, and at some point trigger warning here. If you do not want to see this part, then skip it. But I got really sick. I was puking blood. I had to go to the urgent care because I was puking blood. And I think I was only about 9 weeks by that point, where I ended up in urgent care and getting fluids and stuff like that. At this point, I think I was also on it starts with an R. It's a pretty popular one that most people go on, but that one was not working for me. So I was put on Zofran, and Zofran worked miracles for me. I was able to actually function. I was actually able to eat without vomiting all the time. So I was, of course, on the daily regimen of Zofran, to the point where I'm like, I just want the pump, because I'm tired of just keep taking this pill over and over and over and over again and trying to stay on top of it. However, I walked around with my little garbage can, so and I couldn't eat regular food. Everything that I was used to eating, I was now puking up, and my family laughed at me because ice cream was one of my favorite things. I loved eating ice cream in the morning. I don't know why, I did. And then about 10 weeks into it, I was tested for gestational diabetes. I failed tremendously with a score over 200. So I of course failed. I was put on I was tracking first, and then later on I was put on insulin to help my gestation, or to help my numbers, keep my numbers down during the night, because in the morning my numbers were pretty fine, but overnight I did not have very, very good numbers at all, and for some odd reason we just could not figure that out to the point where it's like they wanted me to eat in the middle of the night. But I was always puking. So it was like, how am I supposed to juggle puking and diabetes and also trying to find things you can't eat without upsetting the diabetes and everything like that. So that was a whole thing. So eventually we did get that under control with some Zofran, but of course I still had the numbers they just were not good. All right. My overnight numbers were not good. So that's why I was eventually put on insulin. Even with the insulin, they were doing better. They just weren't the best they could be at that time. I had lots and lots of appointments. Got to see Atticus quite often on the ultrasound. So pretty much every doctor's appointment I went to, I got to see her little beautiful self, because I got to see her grow from a little pole all the way into a little human, little floating around in there, and got to see her bounce around and do all types of stuff. She's a very active baby. When I would eat spicy stuff, she'd just go kicking. I have so many flutters in my belly. Which then I found out later was her moving. When I didn't know what that was. I thought it was gas, but no, it was actually her moving around. And so then, yes, back onto the story. About 19 weeks. So at 19 weeks, I got up that morning because, that's just what you do. You get up in the morning. I got up that morning. I felt sick like always. Went to cough, and something felt off, let me fast forward. Actually, I had a SCH, which is SHC, which is a subchronic hematoma, which is a bleeding between the placenta and the uterus or something like that. There's some bleeding. I had a little bit of that, and that was well before I graduated from my IVF clinic to the doctor's office. I had it before then. They told me, hey, you might see some spotting. This is what it's from. Blase. Okay, cool. So I went, and weeks later, I eventually ended up having some spotting that I did eventually tell them about. It was very, very little. And I told my doctors about it. Hey, I'm having this spotting. I know they said I could because of this, that, and the other. And they said, well, we don't see anything. There's nothing there. They gave me a ultrasound to make sure that I had no openings or anything like that. It was a possibility that my cervix was a little short, but they kept the eye on it. It didn't shorten anymore. And at this point, they decided not to continue with the stitch. And that was at about 15 weeks, I want to say. And then 15 weeks. And then so fast forward now back to 19 weeks. At 19 weeks, I then got up that morning. Like I said, I felt like I had to go puke, so I tried to hold it in. I coughed a little bit, and all of a sudden there was this huge gush of water. It was all over the floor. And as my wife's also standing there, and she's just telling me not to freak out, and I'm trying not to. And so, whatever, I get in the shower and head to my doctor's appointment, because I also had a doctor's appointment this day anyway. And if you got to watch episode 1, then you kind of really know the rest of the story. They swabbed me to see if it was amniotic fluid, tested positive for amniotic fluid. They did an ultrasound, found out that, I had completely ruptured my water. And at that point, they urged me to possibly have to terminate, because if I didn't, things could just get bad and I can get really sick and everything like that. So they was like, hey, well, I didn't want to do that. So they said, hey, we'll keep an eye on you, and, you'll come in every few days just so that we can make sure that you're not getting an infection. And so I of course, kept going back. I didn't have any tenderness in the belly. I was not specifically checked for infection. I was not specifically checked to see if I was sick. The only thing is they know I didn't have a fever, and they know I didn't have tenderness in my belly, and that was about it. At about 19 weeks and 5 days, I had my level 2 ultrasound, which is where they go and they look at her kidneys and all of that stuff. And she was doing perfectly fine. She did great. She had a great heartbeat. Everything was moving as planned. She was, growing right. So it gave me a little bit of hope, but then they also told me that within 2 weeks, usually within 2 weeks of this happening, most people tend to go into labor. I was still, of course, obviously upset. I was still obviously grieving. I was very emotional at that time, as anybody would be, right? So we are going through all of that, and I was sent home and told, hey, we want to at least try to make it to the 23-week mark, 24-week mark. That is more of the safe mark where the lungs are a little bit more developed than what they would be at where I was, and they can also start to do steroid injections to help the lungs develop faster and things like that. So they call it the safe point. And that I would go back to my level 2 if that were the case. Well, then the next day at 19.6, I ended up started to have contractions. I called my wife. I'm like, hey, I think I might be going into labor. She rushed home. We rushed up to the doctor's office, or we rushed up to the hospital. Because of how far along I was, they actually was unsure if I was going to be going through the ER, if I was going to be going to labor and delivery. And me being in as much pain as I was in, I just wanted to not be in that wheelchair. So they got me to the ER. They immediately called labor and delivery, and they were just like, hey, we'll take her upstairs. 19.6. I went upstairs. They checked to make sure I was having contractions. I was. They checked on Atticus' heartbeat. She was still going very much strong. But she was also breached in my cervix. So her foot was actually in the cervix. So I was dilating, and she was coming out, I guess, all on her own. And eventually, it was at that point where they told me I actually was going septic. I had an infection, and that basically we had to make a choice right then and there. And the choice was I had to continue, of course, I continued with the pregnancy, and I went through the contractions. I went through labor. I gave birth to Atticus. She was born at 10:40 p.m. and she was of course not breathing when she was born. They cleaned her up a little bit, but at that time I wasn't able to hold her because I was very shaky. Going through the motions, very much in a lot of pain. They were cleaning her up, of course. And once they cleaned her up, I got to see her, I think, for a quick second, but then I was also very ill at that point. That was at the point where it really started getting very spotty. I was in and out. It was very cold. Not quite sure what was going on. I just remember the doctor saying, hey, we have to take you to the OR because your placenta is not detached. You're bleeding too much, and it's not. We have to do an emergency D&C so that they could pull the placenta out because it was getting really bad. So that is about as much as I remember, being wheeled into the OR, and then I don't remember anything after that other than I woke up the next morning to a pretty horrific story. I know I was given blood because I had lost that much blood. I needed to be given units of blood. I was still given blood after I woke up. I was given, I believe, some more blood, and I had to be intubated. And that's about as much as I can recall as far as the story goes, because of course I wasn't there. I don't know. My wife knows more of that story than I do. She'd be able to tell that part a whole lot better than I can, because of course I wasn't there. I wasn't there. All I know is that I definitely could have also lost my life that day to sepsis. But I didn't. That next day I did get to hold Atticus and spend so much more time with her. I got to love on her, got to hug her, kiss her, let her know that I loved her and how beautiful she was, and so on and so forth. I got to shower and eat and kind of feel a little bit like life was going to be a little bit normal, but then life wasn't normal. Life had changed for me very drastically that day. A lot changed drastically for me that day. And that is where we're going to be wrapping it up. And I will be talking about more of that in episode 3. Grief. We're going to be talking about grief in episode 3. What I did to deal with my grief. How I got through it. Of course, I'm still grieving. But how I got through not being able to cry every second of every day. Because believe me, I was crying every second of every day from the moment I woke up in that hospital bed and I had to hold my cold child in my hands. So if you are definitely wondering about what happened after that, how did you deal with the grief, hopefully the answers to a little bit more questions that you guys might have, we will be discussing that next week in episode 3. It's about to get real raw, it's about to get real, and it's about to get real teary, okay? So, and I'm not afraid to put that here. I'm not afraid to cry on camera. I'm not afraid to cry in front of you guys. Believe me, I am crying with you, okay? I am crying with myself. I'm still leaning into my grief, which is the one thing that you can do. Lean into your grief. Don't let anybody tell you how to grieve. If you get sad and you want to cry, you cry. If you get sad and you want to smile, you smile. If you need a second by yourself because you just need to talk and love your child, talk to and love on your child or your loved one, do that, okay? Nobody can tell you how to grieve. Grief does not have a finish line, okay? So I really hope to see you guys back here for episode 3, where we'll be talking a lot more about grief and how to deal with those emotions. And hopefully I'll be able to get a few other people's stories in for you on how they deal with grief. So if you yourself is watching this and you want to be right here added into this podcast, please check out the link in the description. That's going to have the form that you can submit. Other than that, please feel free to leave and drop in the comments our little angel baby emojis. And you can also feel free to leave a little bit of your story there, how you deal with grief. Just, tell us how you got through it, the things that you did, the things you listened to, the things that took your mind off of the sadness and stuff like that. Feel free to drop that in the comments, okay? I will be reading them all. I promise you. I might not reply, but I am reading them all. I promise you that. So for right now, let's go ahead. Let's give a moment of silence for our angel babies and our angel family members. All right, guys. I wholeheartedly just thank you guys for being here today. I thank you for watching this episode. If you have made it this far, I know it's been a long one, but hey, this is a podcast, unedited, it's raw, and it's us. So if you are definitely here having a good time and you've made it this far, drop some angel baby emojis for me, and like, comment, subscribe, and make sure those notification bells is on so that way you can always stay up to date when I'm dropping a video and when a video will be coming out. And as you already know, every Thursday 7:30 p.m. be right here where we're going to be having more discussions on infant loss and prom awareness. So see you guys next week for episode 3. Bye, guys.